I'm currently a sophomore in college, and the bar scene here is pretty big. Going out for the night to get some special deals on alcohol so you can get plastered with your friends is kind of the go-to here. Despite this, I'm not a huge drinker and don't enjoy it a lot because it tastes so bad and hurts my stomach. I do enjoy the company though, and I often just go out to be with my friends or meet new people. A lot of the times I'm called the dad of the group because I end up just taking care of all of them all the time. That's the prelude to what happened when I decided to go out with them one Friday night. So we all get dressed up, pre-gaming a bit at my friend Q's apartment before we Ubered downtown to one of our pretty well-known college bars and clubs. After we got in, my friends immediately split off into tiny groups, combing over the bar for girls they wanted to try their shot at spending the night with. This is going to make me sound weird, but one-night stands aren't really my thing, and I don't want to end up blocking my friends. So instead of looking for girls, I usually find someone at the bar and just make friends with them. I was chatting with some dude that was wearing a cowboy hat, when eventually, a girl approached me. She was pretty cute, probably 5'6" with dirty blonde hair, and eyes that I think were light brown. But they were so light that they almost looked gold, which threw me off a bit. She asked if she could buy me some drinks in exchange for being her friend for the night. And I, of course, accepted because, hey, that's what I came here for anyway, right? Anyways, she kept to her word. We started talking to one another and she introduced herself as Alexia, but to call her Alex. I asked her some basic stuff about herself, if she came with friends and if she went to college here, to which all the answers were no. That struck me as pretty odd, because honestly it's pretty unsafe to be in the downtown area, especially alone as a girl at like 1 in the morning. She kept asking to hear about me though, and actually seemed pretty excited to listen. It felt like a really nice change of pace because usually I'm the one learning about other people, not the other way around. It also could have been the alcohol starting to take effect since I'm a pretty big lightweight, as like I said, I don't binge drink a lot. The whole time I was talking, she stared into my eyes and had this warm smile that made me feel so acknowledged, if that makes any sense. I felt like she was enjoying her time as much as I was, and that just made me even happier because I thought I made a new friend. That was when her demeanor began to change though. She started to get kind of flirty and eventually asked if I wanted to go home with her. Like I said earlier, I'm not a one-night stand kind of guy. I explained that I like to get to know people a little better before sleeping with them. I'm pretty sure I saw what I thought was anger flash across her face, but was quickly replaced with another smile, and then she suggested just going home and watching a movie instead. I agreed, and then pulled out my phone to begin ordering an Uber. She basically grabbed my wrist and started guiding me outside. I was confused, trying to ask if she was planning to drive after drinking, but she wouldn't really give me an answer. We eventually got outside the club, and she pointed to a black Honda Civic parked right at the front of the club. That was when all the warning bells rang out like a tornado had passed through them. I was pretty drunk at this point in the night, maybe 6 or 7 drinks deep, but I was still aware enough to see those red flags. She said she'd come alone, but the lane the car was parked in was only for pickups. I never saw her order an Uber. Someone would have had to have been driving that car. This was enough to make me uncomfortable, and I asked again if she was planning to drive. She said yes as we continued to walk closer and closer, and I knew that it was a bald-faced lie. As we got closer, my heart sank as I noticed the outline of 3 other guys inside that car. At that point, my adrenaline kicked in. I yanked my hand away from her and said, "There's no way in hell I'm getting in that car with you." She tried begging me one more time, saying she really wanted to have sex and would let me do whatever I wanted, but I'd already turned around and walked back into the club. She started cussing me out, practically screaming at the top of her lungs as I walked back up to the bouncers to go back inside. I texted my friends about what had happened, and we all met back up and went home. It was obvious that she was going to college bars, trying to get guys drunk before offering to sleep with them, so she could get them inside that car with those other 3 men, to rob them or do God knows what else. I called my city's anonymous tip line and left a detailed description of the car, the girl, and the place where it all happened. That night was a real wake-up call for me. I'm so thankful that despite being drunk that night, I was able to piece together what was happening before it was too late. Please, remember to always be safe when going out with your friends, especially when it's late at night or alcohol is involved. but to Alexia, or Alex, who I saw that night at the bar, to never meet again.
So this happened about 13 years ago. I was 10 years old at the time and my brother was 8. During that year, we had just moved to a new town and the Walmart had this sweet arcade up near the service desk. So every time my parents would bring us grocery shopping, they'd give us a few dollars and let us go play in the arcade. Now, the town had an incredibly low crime rate and the arcade was right at the front of the store where dozens of people were checking out. So I mean, what could possibly go wrong? So my brother's playing the claw machine while I'm standing on the side of it and trying to help him angle it perfectly above a stuffed animal that he's trying to get. Suddenly, this random hillbilly walks up to the claw machine next to us, inserts a quarter, and begins moving the claw around. But for most of this time, he's making eye contact with my brother and smiling, not even watching his own game. He's not even talking to us. He's just staring and smiling. He has long, thin brown and silver hair pulled back in a loose ponytail at the base of his skull. He also has a camo trucker hat and a long, scraggly beard. I think I can remember vividly the way he smelled. It was kind of like a stale beer ashtray and something that smelled like a sweet yet sour dirt. Or maybe fungus. I'm not really sure. He tries to make small talk with me and my brother. The way we were raised was to always be aware of strangers, but still be polite. Eventually we get bored of the game we're playing and I usher my brother to follow me to a new game, which was on the opposite side of the arcade. A few seconds later, the man follows us, then stationing himself once again right at the claw machine next to us. At some point, an overweight lady had walked in and then said to the hillbilly, "Hey, what are you doing to these little kids?" and then snickers at me. He then replies with,
"I'm trying to win them some stuffed animals."
The lady then begins playing the claw right on the other side of us, so pretty much now my brother and I are literally sandwiched right between these two strange hillbillies. His comment comes across kind of weird to me because I previously thought that maybe he was just trying to win something for his kids or something. But this entire time he had just been following my brother and I around from game to game trying to win us toys. This has been going on for maybe about 20 minutes at this point. They followed us to several different machines and spent a lot of money. Every single time my brother and I switched machines, they'd follow us. The hillbilly then says to the lady,
"Hey, I'm out of money. You got any?"
She then says back, "Nah, I'm broke too." My brother then says, "I have $1 still." Now, this is the part that really scared me. I remember listening to these two talk about some really weird things to us. Asking if I have a boyfriend, asking where we go to school, where our parents work, if we've ever done drugs, etc. But when my brother said he had $1, she then responded with the most terrifying thing I'd heard from them yet. The woman suddenly burst out with, "Well shit, then go ahead and give it to him, boy." Her face was red. The tone in which she shouted was so ear-piercing and gut-wrenching that I could feel the blood drain from my face. My brother looked like he was about to cry. He hands her the $1 and her face lights up. She laughs it off, almost like she's trying to make it seem like she was joking when she yelled at us. My father then walks up a couple of minutes later. As I turn to tell him that these people have spent about $15 to win toys for us, they leave hurriedly before he's able to get a good look at them. My dad is totally livid. He takes us up to the front desk and he tells them what I told him. They had made an announcement on the intercom to keep an eye out for these people and to report it to an employee if they see them. Then they called the police. I don't actually remember this part or really much of anything after my father arrived, but this is what he told me. They never did find the couple. Apparently, the police reviewed the security cameras and then told my parents that the couple left the store pretty much immediately right after my father showed up, and without any groceries. Every time I see a man or woman in Walmart that looks as I remember them, I get really bad anxiety and try to avoid them.
So, I've been working at Walmart for about 3 years now. It's not the best job, but it has decent pay and was enough to pay half the rent while my boyfriend paid the rest. I work and go to school full-time, so managing both my job and school was a hassle. One week, my managers, being the jerks that they were, gave me a week of closing shifts. This was really inconvenient, as I had a 7:45 a.m. class on Wednesdays, but they didn't seem to care about that when I spoke to them. It was annoying to say the least, but I sucked it up and worked my shifts as scheduled. The night shifts usually consisted of us cleaning, putting things back on shelves, etc. Well, one night during that week, it was 10 minutes before we closed, and the only ones in the store were me and my other coworker, Seth. Seth was counting up the registers while I was mopping the floors of all the aisles. At one point while mopping, I go down one of the aisles and see a man looking at the shelves of the arts and crafts section. This was odd, as Seth and I did a sweep throughout the store to make sure everyone was gone, and we didn't see this man anywhere. I wasn't sure what it was, but I started to get this weird energy off him, and not the good kind. I politely tell him that the store is closed and that he have to come back tomorrow. He looks at me and profusely apologizes, telling me that he just has to pick out one more thing. After all, we had closed just a few minutes ago, so I made an exception and told him to get whatever he needed, but to make it quick. That being said, I finished cleaning and radio said that we still had one last customer in the store. He said that it would be no problem and that he'd ring him up. With that out of the way, I decided to go put the cleaning supplies away and took that time to use the restroom before I clocked out. Now, the restroom in the front has been out of order, which meant that I had to use the one in the back of the store. I go into the bathroom, take off my vest, and do my business. About 30 seconds later, I hear the door to the bathroom open and someone step inside. For some reason, I thought it was Seth telling me that he was leaving or something, and with that, I called out his name. However, I didn't hear a response back, and that's when I texted him asking if he were by the back of the store. He instantly responded, saying no and that he was still waiting for that other customer. That's when I look up and see an eye staring at me through the crack of the stall. It's safe to say I screamed the loudest I've ever had and pulled up my pants and basically rammed the door, pushing the man to the ground. I ran over to the front and told Seth everything and to call the police. Thankfully, the police station wasn't too far from here, so they were able to have an officer over within 2 minutes. Police had told us to get out of the store while they went inside, as they didn't know if he was armed. Turns out, he actually had a 4-inch hunting knife he had on him from our outdoors section. He had it in his back pocket, and God only knows what he was gonna do with it. He was arrested, of course, and has actually done similar things before. He had been put in jail before, but was released for good behavior. This time, I'm not sure as to how long he was gonna be in jail for, but I hope it's a while, as that was probably the scariest thing to ever happen to me. If something feels off or wrong about something, I strongly suggest that you always trust your gut. It may just save your life.
I was 12 years old when this happened. My childhood was kind of crazy, and I was held back a year from all the moving around, so I was in 5th grade. We had just moved to a small town in Texas from Dallas, where my mum's most recent marriage had failed. I was not used to small towns, and pretty gullible for my age. We moved into a small little house, almost like a little shack. But it was in the older part of the town. I'm not sure if all states have neighborhoods like this, but in Texas, the historical districts of smaller towns are odd, in that they originally built very large, very nice houses, right next to small, crappy ones. The old, nice ones seem to mostly remain nicely restored, where the smaller ones have fallen into disrepair, So you have these kind of strange neighborhoods, where one block is full of very well-to-do people in nice old homes driving luxury cars, right next to a block that feels like a third world ghetto. I lived on the ghetto block. My school was about 4 blocks away. The bus wouldn't even pick you up so close, and my mum didn't own a car. So I'd walk to school, and I walked by this house every day. Even here it stood out. Huge 2-story home, red brick, large white columned porch. The yard was immaculate. It looked like someone wealthy must have lived there, and being so poor, that was impressive to me. I'd heard stories about the owner. He would yell at kids and throw rocks, spray the water hose at anyone who tried to cut across his yard, and he always seemed to be outside on my way to and from school. But he never said anything to me at first, so I never gave it much thought. I had been walking by his house for about a month before he ever said anything to me. I should say here that even though I was 12, I was tall for my age and developing early. I also dressed really inappropriately. This wasn't really on purpose, but I was growing and we were poor, and my clothes fit poorly, and Texas was very, very hot without air conditioning at home. So I wore as little as possible. I wasn't completely stupid though, and didn't mind the attention from teenage guys. I really didn't have any friends since we moved so often. About a month after walking by, he talked to me for the first time. He just said, "Hi, it sure is hot out here," or something along those lines. I just agreed with him and said I was dying, I was so hot, and he offered me a soda. I don't know why I agreed. I guess I was just really hot, and I did want a soda, and he brought me over an unopened one. After this, he would talk to me every day. Not long conversations, just about the weather, school, where I was from, etc. He looked a little creepy, to be honest. Always wore a cap. Had that look that people get from working outside all their lives, coupled with probably chain smoking and poor diet. But his house was so nice, for some reason I decided he must be a nice person too. After a month of passing by and short small talk, he mentioned to me that he had a pool, and if I wanted to see it. It was late May at this point, and that sounded good to me, as he seemed trustworthy, and again, I was really stupid. He brought me through the house, and I checked out the pool. I have never seen someone who had a pool at their house before. It seemed unbelievable. He said I could swim any time I wanted. Then, for the first time, he looked at me, and it's like his whole demeanor changed. And he said, "I'd love to see those tits and that arse. Damn, we don't wear clothes here." Honestly, it wasn't even the words. It was the way he said it. The immediate change in his demeanor. The tone of his voice. I felt I was in serious danger, but had no idea what to do. He then grabbed at my shorts as if he was going to pull them down. I started crying. It's like he zoned back into reality, and started laughing. Then he stepped away and said, "Well, anytime you want, you better get going." And I left through the gate. I never told anyone, and started walking another way to school until summer started. The next school year, I thankfully never saw him outside of his house. Then, the second month after school started, I heard from my mum a crazy story. He had driven his truck into a Lubby's in a close-by town. He shot 48 people that day. 24 of them died. He then killed himself. Also, apparently, he was stalking 2 of my neighbors. His name was George Hennard. I still don't know how to process all this information. It creeps the hell out of me to this day.
So this happened a few months ago. I'm a sophomore in college and was traveling down to my hometown over break. I was having some relationship issues with my stepmom, so I didn't want to stay at my dad's house that night. I arrived soon after in my hometown. I phoned a friend of mine from high school to ask if I could stay at his place. I knew them from social media, and I knew he was still in town. I've stayed there before. I knew it would be a good place for me to stay if they would allow it. So my friend, let's call him Z, seemed like a pretty normal dude. We weren't like best friends or anything, but we got pretty close by the time we'd graduated. We would occasionally text or hang out if I was actually in town, catch up and reminisce on times that we'd spent in orchestra or in English class together. When I called, he seemed extremely enthusiastic. Z's a normally upbeat guy, but this time, it seemed like he was getting a brand new car or something. I didn't really think about it in the time, and he said I could sleep in the guest room, so I headed over there. When I got to his house, he was just as excited as he was on the phone. He was bringing up stuff to do like getting high and watching weird movies or just playing some video games. Z's parents weren't home, so we really wanted the opportunity to smoke. I was actually pretty tired from the drive, but since we rarely saw one another, I thought a little bit of bonding couldn't hurt. We played Smash Bros, smoked some weed, and just chatted for a few hours. It lasted a little longer than I wanted to, but we were having fun, so whatever, right? By the time it was getting really late, I'd say around 2 a.m., he started asking me some pretty weird questions, like if I ever wondered what it was like to kill someone, or if I thought anyone would miss me if I was gone. He asked me this along some other normal questions, like if I had a boyfriend, or how my parents are doing, or if I'm making any friends at school. It all gave me a really weird feeling, and I was definitely confused in the moment. But it didn't really hit me until after that Z could be assessing me for something bad. The weirdness of it all just made me want to go to bed. I ended up stopping the game and both went to the basement where his room is and the guest room was. We say goodnight, and I go to my room and get ready for bed. I'm having some trouble sleeping, just insomnia that I've had for a while, so I stay awake for around an hour or so, until I hear movement outside of my room. The walls in the basement were pretty thin, so I could hear footsteps walking past my door, and then up the stairs to the main floor, and back down quietly after that. What struck me as odd was that I didn't hear the basement door open, which creaked when it did. The light didn't turn on either, so I was confused on what Z was actually doing. I then heard him go back to his room. I had this odd feeling, just ever since I met him this night, he seemed a lot different than he's ever been. I decided to look him up on social media and just Googled to see if there was anything out of the ordinary. Everything seemed normal until I found his Tumblr, which was linked from his inactive Twitter account that I found on my Twitter contact list. His Tumblr was, well, disturbing. There were graphic drawings of mutilated bodies of humans and animals. There was links to suspicious-looking websites that I didn't dare to click on. There was text posts and stories about murdering, cannibalism, necrophilia, and torture. There were photos of guns and knives and axes, which after looking closely, were definitely taken inside of his bedroom. The last post, around a week prior, was a text post from the account saying he wished he could find somebody easy to kill, like a homeless person or something. I was immediately filled with dread. I knew he was going to do something. He must have gone upstairs to lock the door. I packed up my things, and luckily I packed lightly. Opened up this small window at the top of my bedroom's wall. I started desperately climbing through. As I was pulling my legs through, he opened the door. It was dark, but the streetlight illuminated enough for me to see that he was carrying something long and skinny. Probably a knife. He didn't say anything. I didn't say anything. I just turned around and hopped back in my car and drove as fast as I could to my dad's house. I immediately blocked him on everything and reported that Tumblr account, not before telling the police as well. They told me they couldn't do anything, as the guns were registered under his dad, and he hasn't actually done anything yet. Nevertheless, I told my other high school friends not to hang out with Z. Ever since then, I've been creeped out whenever I meet new people. Just the realization that someone I knew so well could underneath be this person who could hurt me, who could have killed me. I don't know what you're doing now, Z. I'm not sure I want to know, but I really hope you're getting help. My biggest mistake in high school was agreeing to take this AP physics class with the seniors. I was a sophomore at the time, so when I walked into the class with the kids much older than I was, my teacher sat me next to the only other person that was even close to my age. He was a freshman and his name was Josh. Josh was one of those people who just gave off weird vibes. He had a sloppily shaven head, empty eyes, and ate warm Skittles in class. He was short and mean looking, and the instant I sat down next to him, my teacher ordered us to exchange numbers and tried to start making us talk. For some reason, I really did not want to talk to him. I wasn't really trying to be an asshole, he just scared me. Sitting next to him felt like what I can only describe as sitting next to a hungry dog while you're holding a piece of chicken. It felt like any second, he would jump on me, even though he was a good 6 inches shorter than I. It really freaked me out that he now had my name and phone number. Even though I didn't even know the kid, I had a feeling that him, knowing literally anything about me, was not a good thing. Luckily, he didn't talk to me for over a week, and after some time, I thought I was just being maybe overly judgmental about him. He was just a socially awkward kid, right? One day, about 3 weeks after I started that class with him, he talked to me. He said something like, "You're that girl that drives the F-150, right?" And I reluctantly said, "Yeah." He then told me that cars were a hobby of his. He'd seen me driving and liked my truck. Even though I was caught a bit off guard, he seemed innocent and nice. So we did kind of become friends after that. He started texting me a lot after school, asking me a bit about myself and sharing a bit about himself too. Like I said, it seemed innocent. I still couldn't shake that feeling that I shouldn't be telling him anything about myself, and I definitely should not be talking to him. The average conversation continued for a month or so, till one day when I came home from work. I worked at a restaurant about 20 minutes away from my house, so when I turned off my phone to drive to work, I honestly wouldn't turn it back on until I drove back home, as phones were prohibited at the restaurant. So one weekend I came home at like 12 a.m. after doing a closing shift, and he had sent me several odd text messages. They all consisted of, "I love you, and I want to take you to homecoming. Be my girlfriend." Don't rub me the wrong way. He didn't seem to be really asking as much as he was demanding me to have a relationship with him, and I definitely wasn't comfortable with that. I ultimately friend-zoned him and told him that I was going to bed. His response was, no. Just no. It freaked me out. It made me really not want to go to class on Monday, but I had no choice. I had to go. He didn't text me for the rest of the weekend. When I sulked into class on Monday, he gave me that same hungry dog stare from day one. I ignored him the whole class. I practically ran when the bell rang, and when I got to my car in the student parking lot, I saw him watch me drive away from the sidewalk. It freaked me out more than I'd like to admit, so I called one of my guy friends and asked him if I could drive him home from school so that I'd feel safer until creepy Josh would be less creepy. He agreed. We made an arrangement from there. A lot of people thought that I was overreacting, but I just knew in my gut that I needed to have someone in the car with me, and this guy friend seemed like the right one. When I came home from work at 10-ish Monday night, I opened up my phone and saw more text messages from Josh. This time, they were much more predatory than the night before, as that night, they were detailing how he'd like me to perform sexual acts on him. I foolishly allowed this to happen for another couple of weeks, still feeling uncomfortable in class when he finally hit a breaking point. Josh started sending me text about how if I wouldn't love him, he had to die. At that point, I decided it was time to involve the dean. She virtually did nothing. She basically explained that Josh was special needs and cut him some slack. Despite the predatory tone of the messages, she told me that she would talk to him about it, and not to worry because he likely wouldn't do anything. I was infuriated and told my dad, who told his army of Italian brothers, who all decided to keep an eye on him. Those creepy messages didn't get any worse, and eventually they stopped after I blocked his number. That was when the creepy shit really started. The cameras outside our house kept picking up a person at night. Someone very similar looking to Josh. This person kept knocking on the windows, looking into my car. My dad called the cops, who were actually awesome, kept a lookout on the house for a while to deter the nightly visits. The cop outside at night, those visits stopped, and my work started getting phone calls from Josh asking if I was working. My manager ended up alerting security, who threatened him to stop calling. Then, Josh decided to start frequenting the restaurant where I worked every day and leave paper cranes on the table saying, "I love you," with my name, and "My new boyfriend's name isn't good for you. I am." He started following me to class, to my car, to work, even though I pretended that he wasn't there. And I was still driving my 6'3" guy friend home. I refused to leave my house without a group of people, and debated skipping prom, slowly becoming a hermit because he just made me feel so unsafe everywhere I went. Eventually, my dad decided a restraining order would be a good idea, and I did get one granted so he couldn't walk near me or contact me for 5 years. Thankfully, this finally caused the year-long nightmare to stop. I didn't see Josh again until my senior year when I was walking down the hall with my friends, and he saw me coming. He stopped in his tracks and slowly watched me walk past him with that same hungry dog look that initially scared me the day I met him. You're probably wondering why he never got into any trouble when I contacted the dean and the police. Well, where I live, there's a bunch of laws that make it exponentially harder for someone with special needs to be punished for creepy behavior, even though they're just as capable to execute their behavior as the average person. The last time I saw Josh was on graduation, and I could have sworn he was in one of the front rows, waiting for me to get my diploma. Although it is possible that he was there for someone else, a part of me knows he was there for me. If there's one thing I have learned from all of this, it's that it can happen to anyone. I never thought this would happen to me until it did. It robbed me of my safety, of my high school experience, and peace of mind. Always trust your instincts on someone. You are not required to be nice to anyone who makes you uncomfortable. That leads me to now. I'm happy. I'm in a serious relationship with an awesome guy. And in a weird way, I'm glad I was able to learn from this whole experience. So did Josh from that AP physics class. Let's never ever meet again.
I still remember this happening so vividly. It was terrifying, to the point that I had to move rooms as I was too scared to sleep in my original one. So here's my story. It's a long one. The houses in this suburb were back to back. So basically, there was a street, a line of houses, a fence sectioning them off, another line of houses, and then their street. The backyards were what touched each other, so you could basically climb your backyard fence and land in your neighbour's backyard. This is important to understand the layout, so I apologise. Towards the back of my house was the laundry, and then my room with a large glass door leading outside. It had windows on the side, which sat on a concrete side passage that connected the front of my house to my backyard. My bed was pushed against the wall with the window above and next to it. 9-year-old me was a night owl. As a young kid, I used to pretend to go to sleep and then wait for the all clear, then turn on the lamp and read my books. This particular night, it was windy, so you could hear the dry leaves being blown up and down the side passage. It was around midnight when I heard the leaves shifting and moving around outside a lot quicker than before. Assuming the wind had picked up a bit, I kept on reading. The noise was growing louder and louder, and it seemed to stop right by my window. The house is an older house, and it sits on stilts, so my window would have been 2 to 3 feet off the ground. I heard a bang against the wall, then a scraping sound. I froze, sitting up in my bed, as that noise came from right behind me. I panicked as the scraping was more and more frequent, and I turned the lamp off and did what every child would do in that situation. I retreated under my covers and hid whilst listening. My heart was pounding. I can still feel the fear to this day. The noises stopped, and I heard the crunching on the leaves as whatever it was walking away. I was trying to gather the courage to run to my parents' room, which was at the front of my house, but that meant I had to pass the glass door. Then I heard a thump, and another thump, up the stairs to the back door, then the clamouring of the wind chimes. They were metal and hung low. Whoever it was couldn't see it in the dark and must have knocked it as they were peering in my door. I heard them grab the wind chime and throw them to the ground. This was followed by tapping and scratching, and they even tried the door handle. I screamed to high heaven, hoping my dad would wake up. I heard the person clamber away. I got up and ran to my parents' room. I woke up my dad in a panic, declaring someone was outside. He took off with his baseball bat and no pants, like the knight in shining armour he was. I don't know how long it was, but he came back and told me he couldn't find anyone, and I should go back to bed. I refused, and slept in the lounge room that night. It got to a point where I was so unsettled, my parents had to shift all the rooms around to move me from that room. It was only years later, when I was 20, that I found out the truth behind that story, whilst we were at a family dinner, talking about things we did when we were young. I brought up that story. My dad turns to me and says, "Since we don't live there anymore, I guess I can tell you that I did find someone that night." Turns out, he found our neighbour, Bill, who was the father of one of my friends from school. He was trying to climb over the fence when my dad caught him, and the first thing he said to my dad was, "Oh, did something make her scream?" My dad refused to tell me what happened after that, but that line chills me to this day. He found his ladder on its side near my window in the morning, which of course he didn't tell me about either. The creep was trying to climb into my room. I live in what we call a villa, where there is a long driveway that leads to 15 houses at the end of a long road. My house is designed in a circular way, in which the kitchen and dining area are walled off from the 3 bedrooms and toilet, but you can walk in circles around the house and end up at the same spot. We have 3 cars in our family, since 3 of the members drive, but I don't yet, and my dad parks his station wagon in this visitor's parking space. From my bedroom window, you have an excellent view of this parking area, great lighting and just an all-around good view. One night, my whole family went out and took my mum's car to a restaurant in the city. I was just at home alone watching a movie, when around 10:30 p.m, there was a knock on the screen door. "Who is it?" I called. "Oh, it's your neighbour. Your dad left his car lights on." I opened my door. Thank God my screen door was locked. There stood a man I had never seen before, and we hadn't heard anything about a new resident moving in. He looked kind of nervous, and he repeated, "Your dad or your brother left his car lights on in the parking space. You really should come out and turn them off." I replied, "Oh, okay. Thank you for that. I'll let him know when he comes back." He didn't move. He didn't flinch. He just stood there staring. You should come out now and turn them off. It's going to kill the battery." I repeated again that I would tell my dad when he came home, and he repeated that I really should, right now, at that moment, come out with him and turn the car off. I told him I was going to call my dad right now and tell him about the car lights, and he began to walk away. I closed the door, locked it, and then went around the back door and essentially barricaded it with locks and some chairs. After that, I placed a butcher's knife underneath my coffee table and I went to the kitchen to look out at the car spaces. My dad's car lights weren't on, and the parking area was pitch black. I never saw that man again.
When I was about 13, I lived in an apartment complex with my mom and older brother in Chicago. It's a very expensive city to live in, and with my mom working 2 jobs to support ourselves, it was a struggle. Those who live in Chicago will probably understand the expenses to live here, especially those in the city area. Anyway, it had been my birthday, and my mom had given me $50 to spend on whatever I wanted. A few blocks away from my apartment was a Walmart supercenter that had pretty much anything us kids were interested in. This was around the time where the new GTA game came out, so my brother and I drove to the store to see if they had any left. My brother had told me that I could go off alone, but to come to the front of the store after I got what I wanted. The second we walk into the Walmart, I instantly go to the game section and thankfully get my hands on the game I wanted. As I'm leaving the gaming aisle, I see a man I had never seen before turn the corner and wave at me. He wore a white t-shirt, torn cargo shorts, and had on a hat that said Nirvana, which, for those of you who don't know, is the name of a very popular rock band. Growing up, I was always taught to be respectful to others, so I gave him a friendly nod as a way of saying hi. Only then did I realize that doing that was a big mistake. He then approaches me while reaching out his hand for a handshake. Almost immediately, the horrid smell of vomit hit me like a brick, but I couldn't make it seem obvious I noticed. He then says in a raspy voice if I liked video games. With a slight smile, I tell him yes and try to make it seem like I was looking for another game. As an extra precaution, I also put on my AirPods, but before I could do that, he says that he has a son who also likes video games. I tell him that was cool and wished him a nice day and leave the aisle hoping he wouldn't follow me. I make my way over to the front when I look back to see him begin to follow me, but keeping a distance. I then walk a bit faster, and it was then where I had saw my brother waiting for me by the front where I told him to just go. At that point, the man had followed me to the front. However, when he saw my brother, he casually looked away and acted as if he were looking at the office supplies on the shelves. Long story short, we leave the store and get into the car to go home, where my brother asked what was wrong in a very direct tone. I hesitate for a moment, gathering up the courage to say it, when he looks out of the window and goes, "So, who's that?" I tell him that he had followed me throughout the store and was asking me weird questions. By this point, my brother knew what was going on. He put the car in reverse and drove out of the parking lot, but not before giving the man a dirty look as we passed him. While driving, he tells me to not tell Mom and that if anything happens that I should tell him. When we got home, none of us spoke to my mom about it, as we knew we'd get into trouble if she had found out I spoke to him. Unfortunately, however, the story doesn't end there. About a week later, on the last day of school, I had gone to the bus stop to wait for the bus. It was around 7 a.m., and I'm waiting for a good 20 minutes when I hear a strange noise from down the street. At the time, it was sort of foggy out, but as the noise got louder, I see up ahead a red pickup truck approach me. The truck slowly rolls up to me, and when I see the driver, I instantly got this sense of dread. In the driver's seat is the same man from Walmart wearing that all too familiar Nirvana hat. He rolls down his window, gives me a smile, and winks as he drove away. Thankfully, the bus had come soon after, and I couldn't be more happier to go to school. After that, I never saw him or his pickup truck again, and I've kept silent about it ever since. We have since moved from Chicago due to my mom getting a new job offer, but I'm just glad I never saw him again.